Good morning. The reading this morning appears to be lengthy. 4 pages, 400 pages. A big number, 3 days. The reading is from Luke 15, verses 1 to 3, 11b to 32. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided the property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked, 'What's going on?' He replied, 'Your father has come.' He replied, 'Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours.' But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found." Thus ended the lesson.
Dissolute living. You ever lived dissolute? Maybe a little bit here and there. But it is, of course, the story of this younger brother's life for a while. And the older brother, of course, was so angry, he said, "I didn't even get a goat." It's an important thing, a goat, you know? It could still be a very important thing to this day. Well, let me tell you a story about many years ago. Suzanne and I, we went on vacation, and I'm trying to think, I can't imagine we didn't take our child with us, but I don't remember Abraham being on that vacation. He must have been. But anyhow, we were at the airport, And we're just on the other side of the security gate. And we were putting our shoes back on, and my belt, and our coats on. And as always, I was checking my back pocket, because I couldn't remember putting my wallet in my back pocket at the gate. And I checked my back pocket, and I guess I always do in a big crowd, because I'm always checking it, and the wallet wasn't there.
Oh.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Yes.
Panic.
Well, have you ever been in one of those moments when you know you just had something and it has vanished? Usually I tell my wife if she's lost an earring, I say, "You just lost it." It's usually the time we figure it out. And it's usually just sitting right here or somewhere in her shirt or something like that. Have you ever had your wallet pickpocketed? Yes. No? It happens. I was astonished. I'm always attentive to my wallet wherever I'm in a big crowd. I couldn't believe it. And as I told Suzanne, and as she got half mad at me, half worried for me, half was good, she somehow checked her wrist for her favorite bracelet. It was gone. At the same moment, we both realized that treasured items were missing from our possession. It had to have happened in that crowded and very close line to the security gate. And of course, no one is allowed past the security unless they have a ticket, right? So somebody might have just taken it from us in that security line somehow. So I decided to go back to the ticket counter, even though we were running short on time. And I went out, and I went all the way to the ticket counter, and the always smiling and cheerful ticket agent was smiling broadly, waving at me. "We tried to get you before you got to security. They had my wallet!" But Suzanne's bracelet was not there. And as I came back through the security line, I was looking on the floor and on the counters and all of that, and it just wasn't there. And she couldn't find it anywhere on her body or on her clothing. The bracelet was lost. Like the prodigal son, my wallet had found its way back home, and I rejoiced in its return. But the bracelet would have to wait. We returned from our trip, and we checked once again with the ticket counter, and we checked with the lost and found, and with no luck, the bracelet was lost truly forever. Sometimes the story of the prodigal son has what we would call a good ending. The child returned, the parent rejoices. And other times it doesn't go so well, and the family is at loss. Now, in the case of the original story, there is one person who doesn't understand or appreciate the magnitude of the depth of love that the parent has for the lost child. From their perspective, the lost sibling deserves to be lost, and certainly shouldn't be rewarded for their indiscretions, their dissolute living. The sibling who stayed home believes that they should be rewarded for always being there and always working for the family without interruption. But if you're a parent, you know the great love that you have for all your children, even when they have gone astray, even if they continue to go astray. You love them nonetheless. God is that way with each and every one of us. Our parent in heaven simply doesn't cut us off. There are Christian theologies and attitudes, though, that would like to convince you that the only way to God's heart is through a very public pronouncement and a personal decision to be born again. Now, this idea is not totally foreign to our heritage. We, too, believe that everyone should turn his or her heart to God, and that it helps to pronounce it in ways. In the ritual of confirmation, we ask our young people to proclaim their hearts turned to God, and for us, it confirms this child's baptism. That was all the time when all the rest of us accepted the fact that this child was already a child of God. The child is just confirming their choice to believe so. But in other churches, the ritual of adult baptism is actually considered to be the point when God takes you into God's protection. This ritual of dying to the past and rising to the surface of the water in new life has been emphasized sometimes to the point where unless you partake of this ritual and you declare your faith in its power, you are considered excluded from the family of God if you just don't do that. You're not one of God's children. This theology, utilizing adult baptism and its power, can have very brutal consequences, as the alternative to belief in baptism is and can be to them eternal damnation. Now, back in Michigan, where I served prior to coming here over 15 years ago, there was a church nearby that as you enter the entrance of the church, there was a little, like a breezeway between the outside and the in, and on a plaque that was right there, it very clearly stated that very belief, that unless you were baptized and declared yourself born anew, you were destined for eternal damnation. Okay, they made no bones about it. It was very clear. You're going to hell. I kid you not. Now, though we may scoff at such things, that sibling rivalry does creep into our understanding of who belongs and who does not belong in church. Every church is somewhat provincial with their beliefs. For some of us who have never attended any other church, we either believe that all others believe like us, or that our way is the way. And still yet, for those of us who have attended other churches, there is still an attraction to the idea that our way is the right way. Much like the prodigal son story, we believe that anyone would be silly to wander from our midst, let alone bringing in ideas from elsewhere on their return that might be destructive to what we might be having going along right here, right now, that we all are very comfortable with. Well, the sibling that stayed home was incredulous that the parent rejoiced for the sibling, the lost one. The father said this, "Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you." This is the child. "I have never disobeyed a command, yet you have never given me a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." As siblings in the family of God, we are constantly bickering and fighting. Sort of like kids in the back seat on a long car trip. It's the truth. When one of us does something wrong, who is the first to point out a mistake? And as a parent, you know your love has few, if any, boundaries. So when a child does wrong, you do not relish in their straying. Instead, what you do is you rejoice in their return to the fold. As a parent, can you see yourself speaking to the other children in your family who may scoff at your love for all your children, and you say, "Child, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours"? As human adults, we tend to act like siblings towards others. Don't we always want to call ourselves a church family? Right? We do it all the time. When we do call ourselves a family, that creates a pecking order and a manner of behavior that looks an awful lot like a family that we grew up in. It's an understood fact, this is, by the way. There's whole sciences that go along with this. So it would be reasonable to understand that the parent of our family loves us all, no matter whether we have stayed home or if we find our way back to home, or even more so, in a parent's longing way, if we are lost and we want to be found, the parent is always going to welcome us back. So as a church family, we are in a dilemma. As siblings in God's family, we have bickered and we have fought. We have seen some stay and some go. Will the roles we play in this story stay fixed? I wonder. Will we have the maturity to look for perspective in stories such as the prodigal son, where we are taught that God loves us all and wants us all in the family? Will we fight for favor and power? Or will we change the end of the story and rejoice as God rejoices when siblings return? Now, Suzanne and I, we were completely relieved when we found that wallet. But the loss of the special bracelet still hangs on us heavily. I mean, I could just bring up that moment again. It wasn't a bracelet of great monetary value. It was one of love. Our best friends had given that bracelet to us, to Suzanne. It had Abe's name on it with special birthstones that were intermingled amongst it on the chain. It's out there somewhere, and we miss it. And boy, if somehow it could return, I guess we'd give up a goat for it. Right? But that's how we should feel then about one another, no matter what the circumstance. It's a matter of reconciliation. It's a matter of deep love. It's a matter of always coming back to the idea of love. And I pray that you do the same no matter what. Whether it be someone who hasn't been to church in a long time, or your own family member who you've carried on a decades-long feud with. Pray that you find it in your heart to rejoice then in this idea of forgiveness and grace and reconciliation. It is what God desires, and it is who God is. So may it be with us as well, I pray. If you are able to stand, would you stand again as we sing Amazing Grace?